Welcome to the session on creating pipelines for hard to employ youth, including ex-offenders and disabled. I think this afternoon I'm excited about the panel that's here. I thought I'd begin by introducing myself first. My name is Ray McNulty. I'm the Chief Learning Officer at Penn Foster. We each have a few slides to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do. Whoa, that was fast. I've got to click on that and go back here for a second just to give you a sense of those people that don't know much about Penn Foster. We actually are incredibly large today. We are one of the largest online learning providers in the United States. And we began in 1890. What's really interesting, it was about educating people that didn't have an education that were heading into the workforce. In 1945, we had 5 million graduates, all through correspondence. Pretty interesting. And even some notable graduates of a correspondence school, people that built the George Washington Bridge and others. So learning outside, I mean, today we have over 130,000 students at Penn Foster. We run the largest high school in the United States, 43,000 students online, 28,000 students in a college, and 63,000 students in certificated programs. We actually operate 41 of the Job Corps sites in the United States as well. And we do all kinds of interesting work. I'm going to do this very quickly. We work with lots of companies and corporations to educate online. And when I think about us, we graduate 25,000 students a year. We're kind of the online school that not many people know about. But we do great work with the Job Corps. And I'm excited about the opportunity today to lead the work in this panel and to provoke. I'm going to start by having our panel introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with Joni.
My name is Joni Blakeslee. I'm a senior manager for Cisco Systems. I work in Seattle, but I have responsibility for all the CSR programs in the United States and Canada.
Great.
Good afternoon. I'm Denis Torbett. I'm Senior Vice President for Workforce Training and Employment with the Home Builders Institute. We're a national training organization based in Washington, D.C.
I'm Annhigdon. I'm the founder and president of Improved Solutions for Urban Systems, ISUS. We created charter schools for dropout recovery in Ohio.
And then lastly, I'm John Dillow. I'm actually a vice president and live in classrooms and have been part of a pretty unique opportunity with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation called New Options. Youth radio team sitting right here in front of me, which is a longtime partner in the work. And you'll be hearing more about that.
So the way we're going to operate this afternoon's session is I'm going to have each of the panelists spend about 5 minutes talking about the work they do with the youth that we've described. They're going to go down in the order that they're there. I'll generate a question to begin a conversation. And then we really would like to have this to be an exchange. And one of the things as we get near the end, I really want to get us to focus in this room on a call to action. What are some of the things we need to stop talking about and start doing? That's really what it's about today. That's really what this event is about. It's great to have Ron sitting in a little while here. It's great. So, Joni, you're first at bat.
So I work for Cisco. So it's not the food company. It is the network technology company. About 85–90% of the traffic that goes over the internet goes over Cisco equipment. So at Cisco, we believe that technology is good not just for business or socializing, but we believe it's a powerful way to improve lives and build thriving communities. That's why we use the same technology and expertise in our social investments as we do with helping our customers and our partners. At Cisco, we focus our social investments in education, healthcare, economic empowerment, and critical human needs. Also disaster recovery. So we've funded a number of rebuilding of schools after Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana and Mississippi, as well as in China after the earthquake in Sichuan. So leveraging public-private partnerships as well as technology, expertise, and cash, we multiply the impact and help communities thrive. The goal is that our social investments is to promote innovation, independence, and long-term progress. So our flagship corporate social responsibility is a Cisco Networking Academy, and it's the world's largest classroom. It brings technology education, 21st century skills, and improved jobs prospects to 4 million students in 165 countries since its inception 15 years ago. There's a blended learning model that combines classroom instruction with online curricula and hands-on learning and interactive tools. The Academy prepares people for entry-level jobs and careers in information communications technology, continuing education, and globally recognized industry certifications. So by doing this, it improves the career prospects for people from all socioeconomic backgrounds and communities. In the United States, there's over 150,000 students concurrently enrolled in a Cisco Networking Academy course at over 2,000 educational institutions, whether at high school, community college, or university. There's been over 1 million students in the United States that have gone through the program. So part of this program, 2 years ago, the Colorado Department of Corrections wanted to become the first academy program in the prison system in the United States. They had already done something similar in the United Kingdom. And the offenders program in Colorado contacted some nearby community colleges to determine if those instructors would feel comfortable teaching in a prison environment. For the first training course, 12 female inmates were selected from an applicant pool of 1,000. And for these 12, it was a tremendous commitment because they had to sign waivers that they would delay possible early release in order to finish the 20-week program. 11 of the 12 students received certifications and interest soared. The Colorado Department of Corrections applied and received a grant. Now, this is a long one. Department of Justice grant from the Second Chance Act Technology Careers Training Demonstration Projects for incarcerated adults and juveniles. They received about $800,000. And what they did is this allowed them to expand the program to 21 classrooms in 7 prisons. So far, at the end of December, more than 250 inmates have graduated from that program. Half of them have received a certificate, and several of them who have been released have received jobs. So one other thing that I wanted to mention going into the rest of this, about 10 years ago, into my now 17 years at Cisco, I started experiencing some hearing issues. And it subsequently got worse, and then much worse. And so the medical diagnosis is that it was a genetic-based hearing loss, progressive and profound. And Cisco has been incredible in making accommodations for me and other employees at Cisco who have all sorts of different conditions, you know, whether it's visual or cognitive or physical. And sometimes I use it to my advantage. For example, if I'm on an airplane and there's a baby screaming, I can just take out my hearing aids. Or if I'm on the losing end of an argument, family argument, I can just take them out and say, I can't hear you. But other than that, quite frankly, without assistive devices for communication and collaboration, I would be very challenged to do my job. And Cisco has provided accommodations for me and other employees. They also do so in the training program through the Networking Academy. So we have students who come from all walks of life, all backgrounds. We're seeing a lot of students who are veterans, who were wounded in service, that are going through the program. And so it really provides very rich career opportunities for those students because they have access to a curriculum that doesn't discriminate against any of those conditions. There's a handout that some of you are getting. There's a student in Ohio who had cerebral palsy. He went through the program, and he's employed at a major service provider today. So I know that in this session we are primarily focusing on offenders and the disabled in our quest to create pipelines. However, I would be really remiss if I did not mention the needs of those who have served our country. By the year 2016, more than 1 million military personnel are expected to transition to civilian life. Unemployment for veterans age 18 to 24 is over 20%. And there's a number of things that we have done at Cisco in partnering with other organizations in terms of creating jobs, as well as linking those service members and having their military skill sets translated into civilian job roles that we have done to help out. So if anyone has any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me afterwards.
Thanks, Joni. Dennis, home builders?
Okay, let's see what we have.
Ah, we should be lined up.
There we
Look at
go.
perfect. I love it when a plan works.
HBI is the, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here and be a part of this distinguished event today and tomorrow. Give you a little background on the industry and some of the efforts that we have underway to help some of the populations that Joni described, and mostly youth, because that's mostly who we're involved in providing career training for the industry. We are recently under new rebranding. We were formerly the Home Builders Institute, the workforce development arm of the National Association of Home Builders. We're still affiliated with NEHB, as it's referred to, and I guess what that allows us is a direct link with employers that are part of NEHB. There's over 130,000 members nationwide that we have access to for helping people get jobs in the industry. But we provide training to our graduates, we build communities, we help our individuals find jobs and careers as well. We build careers, that's our mantra right now. We offer training, pre-apprenticeship, apprenticeship, we have job placement services. I really feel that that is the hallmark of our efforts, in that what good is the training unless people go to work. We have mentoring, certification programs, textbooks, and curriculum. Regarding pre-apprenticeship training, we are the largest training vendor with the U.S. Department of Labor's Job Corps program. We are at 73 centers nationwide, and we have about 156 different programs. In totality, we train about 4,000 people in the construction building trades, focused on residential. And of those 4,000, most of those are youth, and most of the youth are coming out of the Job Corps program. We have several programs in which we're working with court-involved adjudicated youth. We work with youth build programs. We have workforce investment programs that are funded by the local workforce agencies. One of the things that hopefully we'll address in some of the questions today is apprenticeship. I'd like to be able to talk a little bit about that and the need for maybe revamping the apprenticeship system. I mentioned some of the partners that we have: workforce investment agencies, Department of Juvenile Justice, Departments of Corrections. We are, in fact, a nonprofit 501c3 organization. We work with high schools, community colleges, all in an effort to build partnerships to train and place individuals in our industry. As I said, we're part of NEHB. It's a federation, so we have state and local home builder associations. There's a state association in each state, and then there's about 800 local associations. And if I could do anything, I would encourage all of you to get that employer engagement, is to become familiar with the local home builder association that is in your respective areas. We work with unions, and we also, as I mentioned, work with secondary and post-secondary institutions. Just to give you an idea, in the past year we've experienced a lot of growth. Not what it was like in the heyday of the building industry, but we certainly have seen a growth in the industry as it relates to housing starts, employment, etc. This just gives you some fast facts about what it takes to build a home, the home sales in the country. And I guess the one that indicates really strong growth over the past year is the bottom one, where we have 242 improving housing markets in the country. And it's really a very strong rise since 2011. The industry is a very large part of the gross domestic product in this country, representing billions and billions of dollars. And if I could leave you with anything, it's that there are jobs that exist within the industry, and we have to take charge of preparing those folks for work in the industry.
Thanks, Dennis. And tell us a little bit about the work you do and how you're going to help us. I was intrigued by reading your background. It was amazing.
Thank you. I'm Annhigdon, and I'm the founder of an organization in Ohio called Improved Solutions for Urban Systems. And if you'll pardon the personal reference, I'll start with that. I was first homeless when I was 4. My father was a mean drunk, I survived. I'm not a teacher, but I knew something about rising against all odds. So in 1991, I created the project that replaced food stamps with the electronic transfer system in Ohio. We tested it in Ohio, and after that, Congress mandated that every state had to have an electronic transfer system. With the money I earned, I created ISUS. And I had to do that because people reminded me that I had no experience, no degree, no history as a teacher, nothing that led them to believe that I could create a not-for-profit and make it successful. Except the word in Japanese for teacher is sensei, and it means one who's gone before. So if that's a qualification, I had that. We focused on young people, 16, 17, who were already involved in juvenile court. So at ISUS, 7 out of 10 are in the juvenile justice system. Because among this population, twice the percentage will be youth with disabilities. 27, 28% in a year are youth with disabilities. In 2011, the 3 schools that we created placed number 1, 2, and 3 in academic performance among all public schools in the city of Dayton. In addition to that, our young people spend part of their time in service. So if you're in healthcare, you volunteer at hospitals and nursing homes as you earn your credential for phlebotomy, EKG, and nurse assistant. If you're in computer technology, you're working for A+ certifications, and those students refurbish computers that we give to poor kids in the inner city. If you're in advanced manufacturing, then you operated a computer-managed system that had the capacity of building all the walls for 8 2,000-square-foot homes in one shift. And our construction students use that to build 60 homes in the inner city, including a replica of the Wright Brothers homestead, a replica of the Thomas Edison Menlo Park structure. These young people were recognized. One reporter called them, he said, "Ann, these are the overaged, underachieving, non-attending, court-involved disciplinary problem dropout youth." Well, when they won an award from Dayton Business Journal as the Business of the Year, when we were selected by the Dayton Business Journal for the Regional Leadership Award, when they received the HUD Secretary Award, I received the Purpose Prize, the Manhattan Institute Social Entrepreneur Award, and so many others. They looked at me and said, "So what do they think of us now?" We don't sell it as a program for young people who are disadvantaged or court involved. We just simply set out to be the best at what we do. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. John?
Not sure how to follow that. It's amazing. So yeah, how do you do that? So anyway, John Dillow, the work at Living Classrooms really gets broken down into a couple of buckets, and I'm going to concentrate on our workforce development side of the equation, where we really have 2 fundamental programs. Now it's hard to believe, but I'm in my 20th year at Living Classrooms, so I started my career, I don't know, 14, 15 years old there, I guess. So one of them is Fresh Start. Fresh Start's a youth offender program. These are all young men. It's a nationally recognized effort. They come to us for 40 weeks. Some of them are coming directly from a lockdown facility. Some of them are coming from home, however you define that for them. While they're with us during that 40 weeks, it's really about 2 things: getting you ready for the job, getting you ready for the job. It's pretty simple. Because guess what? If you're going to be successful, what I say to staff all the time is, what you have to imagine is they're going to leave us at some point, and 5 years from now, do you still want to have to check in on them to make sure they got to work? Did they know what to do with their paycheck? So there's a lot of work around hard skills. There's a lot of work around soft skills. I don't know if anybody's heard this phrase, but we like to use it a lot, which is you get hired for your hard skills, but you get fired for your soft skills. Thank you, Derek. So it's like, that's exactly what happens. So many young people gain these skills, and then they get out there and they don't really know how to manage the expectations, manage their time, get to work, get there effectively. Fresh Start is nationally recognized because one of the things we do is once a young person leaves our program, there is just a personal thing inside of me that just drives me every day, which is the ability to stick with them and help them. The hardest work is not being in our program. The hardest work is the day you leave my program. We are not a program that says we have a 100% employment rate the day of graduation. What we tell you is 80% of our young men are employed and or continuing their education 3 years after they leave us. Not 6 months, not a month, not a week, 3 years. So we actually have staff that we refer to as retention specialists. Tell them all the time, it's really easy. Forget what your job is, look at your title. Your job is to help them retain their employment. So 3 years you have that. And then you look at the other side of the equation, when we look at recidivism, we actually have less than 20% are rearrested, less than 10% are reincarcerated. That's over that same 3-year period. So we did such a good job at that, all of a sudden the folks of the state of Maryland and the District of Columbia came and said, hey, can you do that for our adult population? So we said, all right, we'll give it a try. So we needed some funding. So back in 1997, I wrote this grant, and everybody's like, John, you're insane. It was an AmeriCorps grant. So we funded our adult reentry program the first 3 years as an AmeriCorps program. Our ex-offenders went out onto the streets of Baltimore with a T-shirt on that had the AmeriCorps logo on their sleeve, and they ran a business that actually was phenomenal to the point where the city of Baltimore started giving us contracts for cleaning and boarding of abandoned and vacant properties. At that point, Baltimore City had about 4,000 properties that needed to be cleaned and boarded. The contractors who were doing it on contract weren't getting it done. We took care of that overload in 2 years. Project Serve, it's called, became once again a nationally recognized program for adults reentering the community from incarceration. And we were able to do that because we started working with folks like the Annie Casey Foundation. So they helped us identify who was coming back to the neighborhood, specific zip codes, so that we could start working with them in programs behind the wire, actually having, you can imagine this was fun, having former ex-offenders go in to the prison system, many times the place they had been incarcerated, to help teach those to come back out and be ready for the job when they came out. Everybody always asks us, why are we so successful? Because when you look at Project Serve, once again, that same 3-year window, we're talking less than 10% recidivism rate. Less than 10%, 3 years. Why does that happen? Day one, we pick them up the day they leave, which if anybody who's in this business knows, you might get released at 5 a.m. or 10 p.m. They don't really tell you. State of Maryland, you're just kind of released and you're handed your bag of stuff and say good luck. So we make sure staff are there to take them along the way. They start work the next day, a drug test is involved the next day, and we help them along their path. Living Classrooms doesn't provide all the services. We're not the experts. All that work, I think, landed us a phenomenal opportunity with something called New Options and what Kellogg's been doing, and I'll get into that a little bit more later because I know there's a provocative question coming from Ray that's going to help us talk about that. But it's really about being a disruptive force in entry-level employment. It's not allowing the same old system that has not worked to continue. There's young adults sitting right here in the front who've been part of the voice of this work, and it's because their voice needs to be heard. Their voice has to be part of the work that we're doing. And on the last note, the reason I'm so passionate about it, just to give you a little clue into who John Dillow is, because I sit up here and everybody looks, oh, look at this guy. He must come from a good family and all this good stuff. By 11th grade, 8 different schools, not of my choosing. Lived in Section 8 housing with my grandmother. So it's one of those things where you got to reach for your passion. You got to look at what motivates you and what drives you. And my grandmother always used to have this phrase. It's like, oh, education is what's going to get you out. And I always thought she meant college. It wasn't until later on I figured out it was just education, period. You know, my brother left high school barely and became an auto mechanic, and now he's an electrical engineer. I'm the one that went off to college on a sports scholarship and got a degree in marine biology. And now I'm here doing this. So.
Thanks, John.
Sure.
You know, I was listening to each of the presenters share their thoughts and their thinking, and I was standing here realizing that I grew up in East Boston, just on the other side of the water, and my mom graduated 6th grade, and Dad did graduate from high school, but I went to the Boston Public Schools, and no one in my family had ever gone to college, and I ended up being somewhat successful in my career in working for Bill and Melinda Gates and their foundation, and coming back to Boston to give a Gates Award to the city of Boston and to work in their high schools. And when I did that, I came to the meeting and said to them this, I was successful in the Boston Public Schools by chance, not by design. Because in the 8th grade, I got a gentleman by the name of John Reagan, who was my 8th grade English language arts teacher. And he changed my life. if it wasn't for him, I would probably still be in my old neighborhood. But I could have gotten Mr. Kelly, who was the other 8th grade English language arts teacher, and I don't know where I would have ended up. So the point that I want to raise for us here, it's about creating systems that are successful by design. Because many of us have been very successful, but it's been an intervention here or there that has caused it to happen. But it shouldn't be by chance. It should be by design. So as I think about poking at this panel, I'm wondering why you came to this session. Because you could have come to many. So I've got a mic, and I'd love to, because your questions need to be answered. And I can poke, but I'd like you to ask the questions. So why'd you come to this session?
It's very simple. I have received grants from the National Science Foundation, the Advanced Technological Education group that focuses on technological education both at the high school and college level. And in 2010, I attended their annual meeting in Washington. And Annhigdon was one of the keynote speakers. And she absolutely blew me away, just blew me away. I mean, she did a lovely presentation here today, but if you give her 45 minutes, you'll be blown away big time. So she's done an amazing, amazing job. That's why I'm here, to listen to her again and the other people who are doing the same kind of work.
Great. So why'd you come
Well,
to this session?
to ask this question.
Great.
How about that? So Ray, I actually want to follow up on that story that you just told about Mr. Reagan as a teacher and about the importance of sort of the way he positioned you to opportunity. So Ann and John, I want to ask you guys about your intentionality of building a network around young adults or around ex-offenders, disabled, but basically how do you better position people to opportunity by intentionally sort of creating, by design, creating that network around them for success?
Ann, you want to give the first shot?
I'll give it the first shot, but that's a hard question. The first,
That's why we're here.
I do have an idea that I'll share at the very end, but the first 7 or 8 years I worked with the Dayton school system. I read an article that said 63% of the urban kids were dropping out of school, and that when the next system they hit was the juvenile justice system. And when they did, 7 out of 10 recommitted within 3 years. And so this is why I became involved. But in the 8 years that I was there, the system fights back. So I spent that whole 8 years figuring out how to violate the system. And then finally what I did was thought we could compete with the system for a minute, just not because I thought it would be the long-term solution, but I thought if you could demonstrate how this population could do so much better, then what would the excuses be? Do you see? So now I have another idea that I've been told is to come in later.
Oh, good.
But,
You can throw it out now.
well, in other systems, you have a research and development entity, and their job is to innovate. They have a license to innovate, do you see? Within the systems, people who come in with ideas that change everything, it's really pretty threatening for lots of reasons. Let's say the school year is 920 hours, and you talk about a 1,300-hour school year because the average 17-year-old is reading at the 6th grade. And so you know you can't do it in 920 hours. Or when you talk about hiring from the private sector, if you're going to teach in a secondary school, you have to be vocationally certified. So you can hire somebody with a PhD who's been at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, who's done, and they can't come into the system. So we raised the money to finance their vocational certification. And if you needed to have industry certs, what we needed to have was Voc cert, industry cert, and then it occurred to us that if anybody wanted to go to college, we wanted to get them through those first level courses. So we got our instructors approved as adjunct faculty from the community college. I mean, so over the period of 20 years, ISUS was never a model. ISUS was an organization that was looking for answers. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to say is that you're building an image for these young people where they become an asset and not an imposition. So when we built homes, we did wraparound porches, 2,400 square foot, historic replicas. And the last one they built, which is a replica of the Thomas Edison Menlo Park, it generates all the energy that it uses. I mean, so the idea was to have them, to raise the bar for them each year, which incidentally they rose to. They made me look good. And put it out on the front page among people who had the respect in the community, like the Dayton business community, and then share with the community who these young people were. So that was the way that I evolved over those years to create what we created. And so systems fight back, and it's very hard. You've got to do both. You've got to do the micro and the macro at the same time.
John?
I couldn't ask for a better segue when I heard the word innovation. So really quick, our work at Living Classrooms, these intentional networks have been built over that 3-year period. And that's really important. Like, I look back on my own personal experience, not a social worker, I don't have a teaching degree, but what made me get through life successfully was having a supportive network, which included my dad, my grandmother, some professors and family friends. So we've created those intentional networks. Where the innovation comes in, I mentioned already this work with Kellogg, the New Options Project. That's been an interesting space for me personally the last 7 years, where Kellogg has told us, go innovate, go be disruptive, be a disruptive force. And what we're innovating on is creating a network around our young people. You know, the phrase we used to use all the time is they're disconnected, and then we had youth let us know that they're not disconnected, we're disconnected. So we're allowing our youth to help influence us and be innovators at the table. We're allowing workforce folks to be at the table with us. We're allowing employers to be at the table. It's really them allowing us the opportunity to innovate with them, because these networks are key. We see it in our youth offender program and our adult program. We're seeing it with what's called Workforce IO, which is this product that we're creating for Kellogg. These networks are incredibly important. I mean, just all of you think back about that person. Everybody has that teacher, that person. It could have been a coach, could have been somebody at your church. There's that person who started your network that influenced you. And we've been intentional.
Dennis, you want to get in on that?
A little bit. What has motivated me, I started off in Job Corps, and my role was to place young Job Corps graduates from Home Builder Institute programs in jobs and careers in the industry. And we were primarily involved 31 years ago just with Job Corps. That's when I started my career. And I saw a need based on the jobs and careers that I could locate for the young graduates of our program. I saw a need for some of these other populations. So we expanded our base, and we've been driven by economics and the need for workers. We've done surveys over the years as to business issues affecting the industry, primarily labor shortages. I've seen the ebb and flow, but always there's, you know, it's level in terms of their opportunities within the industry. And so we got involved under a correctional education grant from the Office of Vocational and Adult Education from the U.S. Department of Education. We got involved with a youth offender demonstration program. So I've seen the results of those efforts, and I've seen that young people especially can get a jump start on a career through jobs in construction. Bear in mind that our industry is not just the hard hat trades. There are 200 occupations that go into the building of a house. So that's what motivated me, and I think provided the impetus for HBI to become involved in working with adjudicated youth and ex-offenders.
Okay. Tony, you all set? Okay. Well, why'd you come? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I came because I have a lot of interest in young people who are trying to make the transition. So my concern or comment that I'd love to have your reaction. We have a lot of innovative programs, and we've been innovating for a good long period of time around these issues. And yet still, we don't have a coherent federal policy that deals with the entirety of the problem. And in essence, we have a lot of policy that kind of, I would, for lack of a better word, say creams off the best of the worst, if that's the way it's looked at. So we have boutique programs and boutique strategies, but we have no comprehensive approach. So our problem hasn't gotten less, our problem has gotten greater, while the innovation and the creativity and the approaches have improved. So I'd like you to comment on that.
So, let me see if I could repeat the question to your satisfaction and well enough so that that Joni heard it and the rest of the people understand it. But it sounds like we have, if I could just take your last couple of statements, we have a lot of really unique and wonderful boutique systems out there that are in Ohio and maybe in Maryland and something happening with Cisco, but we don't have a federal policy or a whole statewide initiative that spreads what we're learning out across many domains. Is that fair enough? Does that make sense? Anybody?
I'll jump in.
Go ahead, John.
Just because I run the DC office, so that puts me in the city of confusion.
The center of it.
The center of it, that's for sure. But, and not to sound too crass, but I don't get caught up in what the federal policy is. I don't have time. I'm looking at a young man who walks into me every day who's worried about walking home or where his next meal's from. You know, we've been running Fresh Start since 1989, and at no point did we ever sit down and say, how's federal policy impacting us? Which I know doesn't really answer your question. But that's kind of how we've had to deal with it, because in order to drive to those outcomes, we have to be that innovative force that's out front. You know, there's always this lag with policy. So policy change happens, and then by the time it's implemented and it rolls out, there's been 5 to 6 years. The way we run Fresh Start today is very different than how we ran it in 1989 when it was founded. If we waited for policies and other things to kind of dictate how and what we do, we'd kind of get lost in that bureaucracy that we try to stay away from. The other thing you should know about Fresh Start that I didn't mention is average reading level of participant, 5th grade level. Average math, 4th grade. So when you talk about creaming the best of the worst, we take the worst of the worst, if there is such a thing.
Let's go right down the line. Ann?
In my observation, the legislators follow their perceptions of the voting constituents. And they don't feel like the parents of these poor kids are the constituents that they have to listen to be very honest. And so they're not taking their lead from that. Even if you look at something that's supposed to be to the advantage of these young people, for example, the charter school legislation, right? It's different, it's state legislation, so it's different in each state. But if you take Ohio, for example, Ohio said you can only do it in the urban areas, which are the 8 urban cities. This was the initial beginning of charter schools. So you had to be in the urban area. In the urban areas, that's where you have the poor kids, right? And the minority kids, right? And what followed that was only the state allocation, not the local tax levy funds, not facilities funds, not transportation funds, but only the state allocation, which meant that only half of the per student allocation followed these poor kids, the overaged, underachieving, non-attending, court-involved, disciplinary problem, dropout youth. I asked the person who is now probably going to be the next governor for something about where the resources went. He said, and it goes to the other districts. So essentially, those resources are going outside of the urban area. And that's something we love the opportunity. We wanted to be able to find at least some basic support. But no matter where you look, if you look carefully, there are disincentives for serving these young people. And if I just might tell you one other thing, in terms of that, when you look at how a school district is assessed, if that kid drops out, it counts against them one time. If that kid stays in, the poor attendance counts, the issues with the disciplinary problems count, the poor test scores count, and they keep counting. So on the system side, the way that the system is set up, it's a disincentive to even attempt to serve them, is it not?
Dennis, you have any thoughts on that?
I would just say that look to what the Youth Build program is doing, and look to what Dorothy Stoneman was saying in terms of integrating academics, work-based learning through construction training and the new trades that they're offering, and then the youth development component. I think all here at the panel agree with that, and I think she is working to make some systems changes and integrating all of these various levels of systems. So, you know, from our standpoint with the construction industry, work-based learning is critically important. So we'd like to take a holistic approach. We realize that we're the best as it relates to construction trades training, but we're not in this game alone. So we'd like to involve as many partners as we possibly can.
Joni?
So, I work on a global team, even though I'm responsible for U.S. and Canada, and so it's one of the things that I keep telling to my leadership team is how decentralized the education system is and the governing system in the United States, which makes it very complicated. There could be a country in Europe or a country in Africa where the Minister of Education deems that something should flow and everybody incorporates that. It doesn't work that way in the United States. However, given the example that I had mentioned earlier regarding the Colorado Department of Corrections, I will tell you just with the team, my team that has been working with that group in Massachusetts, the Department of, I think it's got a different name, but the same sort of thing, Department of Corrections from Massachusetts, they have gone forward and they're starting to implement a program even though they've not received grant money. They saw the value and they're starting to do it. There's conversations going on with California and other states as well as Canada. So what is happening is people who are passionate about it, people who are involved, they are connecting, and we're helping make those connections as well as some of our partners to do so because, as you said, there's not an overarching policy from a federal level that would provide those connections or that continuity, so it's being done at the grassroots level.
Let me before we go to the next question, let me try something on that point because just get to my little, this theory that I have and see if it plays out here. That's a thermostat, and if you set a thermostat at 68 degrees, I think that's the number that generally across the U.S., but it's room temperature. But at 68 degrees, I live in Vermont, I'm hot. And at 68 degrees, there are people that are cold. And the theory, I think, about having massive global fixes for our problems in the future, I think it's that we've incurred a shift in society, and that the shift is this: there is no average anymore. And even as we start to build out big programs, one of the concerns I have is that somebody's going to figure out this works here. They're just going to make it go all over the place, and quite frankly, it may not work somewhere else. And so I kind of like the idea of more grassroots efforts that drive change at a more unique level. I'm not sure what it would be like in Dayton versus what it might be like in Hattiesburg or what it might be like somewhere else. And so I would love to see us recognize the fact that I don't think there's average. What is average? What's the average anything anymore? And it seems like one of the challenges we have is trying to be more responsive to the uniqueness of areas and the uniqueness of challenges. The disabled challenges might be very different from the incarcerated challenge, that, you know, the stigma of being disabled, and we don't like that term, we were talking about that, but and the stigma of being incarcerated are two different things. And maybe we just need to be more unique in our solutions, not looking for like a massive solution, but really powerful, unique solutions. And maybe that comes from just the fact that I work in an online environment where you go at your own pace. Because going at my pace, it might be too fast for Joni and not fast enough for Denis. Just one of those thoughts I throw out there. But I saw a hand go up.
Well,
So.
and Jonathan is Kathy might cover, but
Oh.
one of the things that is almost in reaction, in reaction to that comment, I'm really struggling because I think while there is this, uniqueness and maybe there's no average anymore, there is a basic level of service that everyone deserves that I think
Right.
there can be some universality to that. But I think that the other thing, and maybe this is around our call to action, it feels like policy, in order to service, formerly incarcerated young adults.
Yes.
Right? You have to work around policy versus policy being supportive. And I think there's probably something there to at least eliminating it as a barrier.
I love the way you phrase that, because I think everybody that's in this room that works in any of those areas has worked around the policy that they're with.
Yeah, can
Go
we
right
stay
ahead.
in this space? Because I just want to keep going with this. So
It's really good.
stay in the policy arena. In San Francisco, there's a program, it's run through the San Francisco Goodwill, it's called Back on Track. And ex-offenders go through the program, and if they successfully complete it, and they're a first-time offender, that is expunged from their record. And I haven't really heard of anything like that around the country. I mean, kind of new to this space, but that's huge because that opens this young man or young woman to a lot more job opportunities. In the policy, have you heard of anything in the policy space that kind of opens more job opportunities for ex-offenders that like this one out in San Francisco?
Yeah, in Ohio, there are two pieces of legislation that have recently been passed. And it depends on whether you're currently incarcerated and how many offenses you've had or how long ago you committed your last offense, but you can fall under one or another of them. And when we were working with juveniles, we were able to get the juvenile court judge to seal or expunge records. The complications with that is those records are everywhere. Everywhere. I mean, they are out there for anybody to see. The other thing is that, and this varies by state, and so there's no all-sweeping answer to this, but if you were in the construction industry and you were building a hospital or a school in the state of Ohio, in the contract that contractor signs, it says he will not hire ex-offenders. Right? So the legislation now is looking to indemnify those it looks like you've served your time, you've paid your debt, what else is there to do if you can't restart again? But there are disincentives written in all sorts of different places. An employer once said to me, and the business community is our biggest ally. I can get business to move much more quickly than I can get government to move. So the business community will say, well, Ann, what if this person has had, with the kids, sometimes it's an argument that they got into with the family, a mother's boyfriend or something, and so and they said, well, what if this person punches somebody? I have a liability because I knew that. And so that other employee who got into an altercation with this ex-offender that I hired can sue me. So somehow, as a policy, we need to indemnify, once they've gone through whatever we say they need to go through, and I'm not saying that the person's first step out of prison ought to be indemnified, but I am saying there has to be some way that they can recover, or we do ourselves and our society a disservice.
There's a bill.
Oh, the one that's in Ohio? There are two that are looking. There's some holes in it, and there's some people that are not covered. But yes, they are. And if you give me your card, I'll send you. Mm-hmm.
Dennis, you had.
I'm not familiar with any policy or regulations regarding expungement of record. But in the Civic Justice model, and we use that in our programming, our pre-apprenticeship certificate training, in which our students are learning skills on the job, building Habitat for Humanity houses or renovating other public properties. They are granted good time for the times they are working on these community service or civic justice projects. So what that does is speed up the employment process once they are complete the program and they get credit for the good time that they spend in these civic justice programs.
What I'd throw out there really quick, in Maryland, not so much in DC, but in Maryland, there's been a bigger push, especially towards the adult population that's re-entering from incarceration and really starting to look at what are those charges. Because as you can imagine, there's a big difference between somebody who was incarcerated as an adult when they were 17 and they're now 25, and those were all drug charges, no violent crime. And then they come out to a job site like Ann pointed out, and the employer still deals with that same worry of, I need to be indemnified here in case they were to do something. So Maryland's starting to try to break these down and take a look at them. The bigger challenge we have right now is in Maryland there was a very aggressive effort in the mid-90s going after young adults who they felt were trafficking drugs and actually charged them in the federal court system under drug trafficking laws for kingpin drug trafficking. So if you had X amount of drugs on you, you had to be a drug kingpin. So therefore you were tried in federal courts. And the reason they did that was because it's the city of Baltimore. Guess where the federal court is? City of Baltimore. So it was real easy to make that happen. So, and those charges actually convey with you as an adult, just like a sex crime does. So we're dealing with a large number of young adults now that are still carrying that baggage. When you look at their record, they're 24, 25 years old. The last time they were convicted of something, they were 16. And they can't get a CDL driver's license.
So I have another question.
Yeah, so the question I have is addressing your original question of why I chose this workshop. And the reason I chose this workshop is because last week I was visiting one of my cousins who's in jail, and then we found out that same week that another one of my cousins was in jail. And in meeting with him, I kind of realized that he was just, his mind state wasn't right, and so I wanted to figure out how do we, take individuals that are in those situations and put them on pathways towards prosperity, like the conference is focused towards. And I think these are all the examples you guys gave are great examples. But I was figuring, how do we take individuals that have a mind state of poverty, or a mind state that might affirm poverty, while at the same time attacking or focusing our efforts on eradicating the community of poverty which they grew up in. And so I was just wondering, is that a goal? Or because I know, and one of the reasons I like the programs is because right now it's a solution, and right now it's helping people. But how do we change that community and that environment in the long term? Is that a goal or a role that these programs play?
That is such a profound question. That's a question from somebody who's been there and seen it close up. And it becomes very popular to talk about people as if they are victims and they had nothing to do with being in the situation that they're in. And that's usually not the case. So unless you can create a culture within that training program that gives them a mindset of getting ahead versus getting over, then you have the same kind of situation. So our philosophy at ISUS is, if I'm working harder on your success than you are, something's wrong with this picture. And if you can't see this as an opportunity and be here every day and do what you've promised to do, I will free up your future. I'm not a bleeding heart in that regard. I'm there to give everybody an opportunity who will take advantage of the opportunity. But the reality is sometimes you'll throw the lifeline and they'll throw it back. And so, and there is, it's not on me, it's on the participant. It's on me to do what I can in the role that I have, and the family of us to do what we can. But in the end, they've got to change for things to change for them. So whether you're talking about the soft skills where you got to be there every day, accept supervision, work in a team. Do you want an auto mechanic who understands 65% of how to fix your car? No employer wants to hire anybody with that skill level. So one of the things that we do is we persuade them that what they've got to do is to be the best they can be at what they do. And that's we don't take a half step or a half effort, because it's wasting their time and it's wasting our time. So that whole conversation, and that's reinforced in so many ways, in terms of the creed that we say at the beginning and end of the day, the family meetings, the expectations, the assessment, holding each other accountable. We don't have metal detectors, because nobody's going to want to have a metal detector at their place of employment, so you don't come in armed. Do you see what I'm saying? So you're right, and you have to have seen it close up to see it the way you see it. Thank you for that question.
Anyone else on the panel?
The thing I'll add, just with what we've done at Living Classrooms, when you look at the community we're in, Fresh Start, when you talk about no metal detectors, Fresh Start is on a campus where we run a charter middle school. So the kids from the neighborhood, 6th through 8th grade, are coming to the same campus. They walk through the same gate, side by side as youth offenders. Guess what? Everybody's working together because everybody's trying to better the community. You know, and it's constantly getting the feedback and the input from everybody in the community member. About half of our staff in our workforce development efforts are former participants of our programs. That's what I always tell them. I said, my greatest moment is when somebody there takes my job, because that's what I need. Like, I'm the old guy in living classrooms now, and I've been around for a while. It's like, we need that younger generation to kind of rise up. They were the ones that came to us and said, we need a youth gang intervention program in the neighborhood. So we sought out this group in Chicago called Ceasefire and said, hey, you guys know how to do it, show us how to do it. So now we have what's called Safe Streets, which is probably one of the best replications. I'll say we're one of the best replications they've ever done. But that's, once again, young people in our neighborhood who's had that same vision of, how do we make the community better? We have to lift up the whole community at one time. And they said, this is what's going on, this is what we need. And that's kind of what we've been trying to do, is make sure that voice just keeps getting heard.
I would just like to say, I'm not sure I'm addressing your question, but I know that what we have tried to do is change the mindset of employers, that young people have assets and they can be of benefit and help companies make money. And we do that from working with Youth Build graduates to working with Job Corps students and other young people who have gone through our program. So I think we have made some cultural shifts in understanding of the issues affecting young people.
Thank you.
So I have another question right here.
Yeah, hi. Can we stay with this, the motivational question? And a lot of the program, your program is hands-on work, but an equal amount of of it is academic work. And I'd like to talk, if you could talk a little bit about the synergies that you get from kids going out to work, as opposed to staying in the classroom and doing academic work. I'm at a technical high school here in Boston, and here's a case study. I have one of the top chefs in town came to me and said, how come we never see any of your kids? They should be knocking down my door to get jobs here. You got a culinary program. And so I've started to work on this program, and I'm finding that the culinary teacher said, well, I can give you 1 or 2 kids, but the rest of these kids, they're not really ready to go out there. And I wanted to confront her and say, well, maybe if they got out there, they would bring some of that back here so that they wouldn't be late for class, they wouldn't be flunking out of their academics and all of that. So I'm just wondering if you could talk about some of the synergies that you might get out of your type of program that involves both hands-on work and an academic component.
Sure. The instructor and the staff have to be taught how do you create a culture that prepares them. So there are all sorts of little ways. For example, we know the names of people before they come in. We take pictures when they apply. When they walk in the door, we know their names. All of our teachers are on the door in the hall when they come in. I mean, you know, if they get caught doing something good instead of getting caught doing, if they're not in, we call. All right, if they say they're sick, we go over with chicken soup. I mean, you got to show it to us. I mean, so early on, we're on it. We're on it like ugly on ape. Then they're expected to step up. They're on it. All right, so we start as a team. We want to all be here at the end so that we can finish together. So there's a commitment to each other, a commitment to the project. What we set for them to do is not play stuff. It's real stuff. I mean, they not only build a house, we have youth build funding, which requires us to build 1 house. In 2008, we built 14 homes because the manufacturing students were a part of it as well. So it becomes, it is a matter of setting a culture of achievement. They build a team. Let's say we have a job to do that day, and you're the team captain, you get to pick who's going to work on your team. Are you not going to pick me if I'm late, right, all the time, and I'm going to do a half-assed job for you? You're not going to pick me. So you become a judge, just like an employer is a judge, in terms of who gets to work for that company. They want people who are not going to chase their customers away. And no matter how good their hearts are, they don't want to hire somebody that's not going to do a good job for them because they'll lose business for them. So our students start making those same kind of judgments and being responsible in that way. But it's creating a culture.
Anyone else on the panel that want to weigh in on that one issue before we take some more?
Very briefly, just put a tool belt, a hard hat, and some work boots on a young person, and you're going to see an attitudinal shift. Demeanor's going to change. Self-esteem is going to rise. Behavioral problems will decrease. It really makes a difference in the programs that we operate by putting them out on a job. Now, you got to do that. You got to be safe about it. Working in institutions, security is a big issue, but and safety is a big issue before you actually send them out on a job. But you want to talk about some life changes, that really happens.
Joni?
I would say that the academic combined with something that's relevant, which ties into a work experience or what it's going to be like, is absolutely critical for the students to understand and get an appreciation of what they're learning and how it can apply and the difference that it makes. So at Cisco, we don't have a lot of internships for these students. We have some, but we have a lot of partners and a lot of customers, and so they work with us. And we also have a lot of volunteers in terms of our employees who will go out and they will mentor students, they'll coach students, they'll have job shadows, a number of things like that. One thing that we started almost 3 years ago is each year in the United States, Cisco hosts its largest customer technology event. And this year it's in Orlando, and there's going to be about 18,000 people that will turn up at that event. So what I do each year is I choose 10 students out of usually about 80 to 100 nominations by their instructors. And we choose those 10 students, and they come and work that show, meaning they put together a network in 3 days that services 18,000 people. Those students actually go on later on to get jobs at Cisco or elsewhere. And so what we try to do is create those opportunities for them to be able to really showcase what they've learned, but also have it in a world experience. And it builds a lot of confidence. These students tell us it changed their lives. And again, we have partners and customers that come to me every single week looking for them. So again, I think it's very, very key. I wish there was a lot more opportunities that companies can provide, and I think it's something that from an industry perspective, we need to do a lot better job of looking at that.
One last thing on that one point. It's clear from all the work I did before I took this current job in school transformation, when we find schools that do incredible things with all of their students, it's culture. And the academic, we spend so much, we can measure learning academically, but it's the culture. And if you start with, it's how you make people feel. And if you make them feel like they have no value, they will not give you anything. And I've rarely seen a school improvement plan in this country that has a culture plan as part of its plan. Generally, we need to improve math and improve reading. And the bottom line is you better improve the culture or you won't go anywhere. And I think that's also one of the difficult challenges of youth that have been incarcerated that don't feel like they belong anymore. We've not done enough to raise their level of expectation. We have time for another question, then I want to get some resolution. I'm under the gun. So 2 more questions. No, we can do 2 more questions. Right here.
Okay. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the conversations you have with employers to get their buy-in to employ these young people. What are the barriers that you come up against? And more importantly, how do you overcome those?
It's a good question. We build on the assets that the young person may bring to the table for the employer. We de-emphasize any deficits that they may have. The assets include they're willing to learn. They have a pre-apprenticeship certificate that's recognized by the home building industry. They know the tools of the trade. They know the terminology. They're safe on the job. In most cases, they have an OSHA 10 certificate, and they've actually got work experience and working on these community-based service projects that I mentioned earlier.
What I would throw,
if I could just add one, we deal with it from a business approach, not a social services approach, and I think that's what the business community wants to hear. That's what employers want to hear. I think you're selling a product, so you're a salesperson on behalf of the young person if you're going out and doing the job development and placement. And you have to approach it from a business standpoint and not a social services standpoint.
John?
And I'm going to echo exactly what Denis just said. I mean, we've had partnerships with Aramark, United Parcel Service, which requires a background check, city agencies. I never walk in and say, give our guys or our young women a job. I want them to be treated at the same level that everybody else who came up there is treated with. Because you know what? There's a reason why I have youth offenders competing in the first robotics competition. If you don't know what that is, go online and check it out. At the first robotic competition, we're the only youth offender program that shows up at the DC Nationals, and we kick people's butts, and I love it. Because they don't know who we are. And that's what we want. We want, you tell me what you need. Now, what I have done over the years, and before I came to Living Classrooms, just so you know, I was with Home Depot. My job was to teach people how to bleed orange and open up a bunch of stores in Northern Virginia to make Bernie and Arthur a lot of money. So I know what it's like to hire a lot of people and fire a lot of people all in about a 3-month period. And what I will say is we have pushed a little bit, and having this work with Kellogg has really helped us push with employers a little bit. Tell me what it is you need. There's a very large drug pharmacy retailer who said my cashiers need to have a high school diploma. They use the same POS system that Aeropostale uses in the mall where 15 or 16, 17-year-olds are working. It's the same cash register system. Why does one say I need a high school diploma and the other one says I could have 16-year-olds? So what we've asked employers is specifically tell me what skill set it is that you need. That's what we did with Aramark. You know, Aramark's saying, hey, people with crimes of trust cannot do housekeeping at our resort and lodging facility. I get it. I understand that. That's a liability. I understand it. But don't tell me they can't work as a prep cook in your kitchen. So it's a little bit of kind of, instead of getting caught up in the moment, it's sitting down and saying, what do you need? I'm not asking for anything special because the people we're putting out and what their effort they're putting forward, they're just as good. And what they find out is what UPS found out, is that churn rate, that 90-day churn rate gets reduced. And there's a real value that corporations can associate to that cost of not having to replace as many people in the first 90 days. And that was one of the things I had to do for Home Depot, and it was a big number. And the more people I could have got to stick around for 120, 180, 365, I'd have loved to have done that one. Because it made a lot of people happy, including my wife. So I'd have been at home a lot more. So those are the kind of things we pushed on employers for.
So we have one more question before we can get to some ideas. It's all yours.
So I actually want to speak to more idea-based approach. So my name is Derek Williams, and I work with New Options Project as well as Youth Radio. And so at Youth Radio, I'm a journalist, and I teach a class that is funded through this Measure-wide program in Oakland that deals directly with students who have had run-ins with the juvenile justice system or are considered at-risk youth. And I like the piece that you made about surrounding them with people who are just supportive of them. And so I think what really helps ensure our students' success is that they have these wraparound services where they can ensure that their basic needs are met. So we provide them with food, we provide them with case management services, services that help them in school. So we have an academic and career advising team that each student is set up with. And I think that's really important in ensuring that that student or that participant of a program can be successful, is just surrounding them with a support system that says, yes, this is your situation, but this situation doesn't own you, and holding them accountable to believe that. And I think the part about culture identity is really important. So understanding, I was just wondering, like, what kind of training does your staff members receive in culture identity and understanding that the demographic of students or participants are dealing with what their backgrounds are. Excuse me. Understanding the background of the participants that they're dealing with have, and how do they work with them, and understand that you have to, yes, meet them where they're at, but also work towards progressing them along. And I think understanding, in the MASH class, we do a lot of media literacy, so understanding how the media portrays them and what what the world is being messaged about them. So having them understand it and being brought in on that discourse to change that, and just bringing young people into the conversation around these issues and getting them in the know about how policymakers and government and things and young and adults who are setting out to help them, how they're coming up with these ideas and putting it and bringing them a part of the conversation. I think that's like something that really will help. But I also want to.
So what training happens to help people deal with the culture and the issues that you're challenged by?
Did you? Well, the older I get, the less I am a legend in my own mind. I've seen a lot of different things work, and I've seen different leaders implement different things. So I no longer have a mindset that says this is the way you need to do it. The only thing I can say is this is how we do it, and when we make a mistake, we correct ourselves. So the young people will come in and they'll say, well, they didn't like me because I'm black. You know, I have to acknowledge racism exists. It always has, probably always will. But everybody's not a racist, so what are you going to do about your future? I mean, it always gets back to, what are you going to do? How do you play the hand you're dealt? You know, the other half of our students are Appalachian heritage. It's about a mixture of, you know. So we listen, and then we move on to, you have to take your life responsibility for what you make of your life. When you were a child, you know, you were a victim, but now you are an adult, and so now you're taking responsibility. And so we move to that mindset. We also don't do a lot of preaching. We do a lot of telling of stories. Because when you stand up to talk, the internal conversation says, I didn't do that, they shouldn't have done that, it wasn't my fault, whatever. So, you know, they'll say, well, I didn't really rob that place, it was my friend, and they had the gun, and I didn't know, whatever. So we have a philosophy that says, when friends get you down, get new friends. When relatives hold you back, make them distant relatives, all right? So that you are accepting what it is you've done, whether it was positive or negative, and taking responsibility for making the rest of your life. We say you continue to do what you've been doing and not been successful. That's one definition of insanity. You got to change that, all right? So, and that's the system that works for us. We don't have a lot of time. What we're teaching them to do is how to do it for yourself. So maybe we'll do it the first time. Together we'll do it the next time. The third time, fourth time, we're looking for you to do it. Do you see?
So we have 5 minutes left in our session, and we've listened and talked a lot. And so the question of how we're supposed to be leaving these sessions is with some types of action. So, you know, what is it? Can each of you give us in a minute? This is like, you know, the tough thing, right? But in a minute, can you share with us a thought about, like, what is it that we need to do to become the influencers of the policy, of the system, to change this hit and miss practice that occurs, so that it becomes more of a system of transforming?
So I'll just speak from a corporate perspective. So about 13 years ago, there was a number of groups that started within Cisco, and they're called ERGs, or Employee Resource Groups. And so I was on the group that was the Women's Action Network. You know, I'm in technology, I've got a computer science degree, there wasn't a lot of women. And so women kind of got together, that especially women that were spread all over the country out in remote areas, that they were the only female in the office. So they got together virtually. There's a number of other groups, GLBT, veterans, East Asian, East Indian. And what's happened is these groups are so strong. There's a group that's on the back of the handout called CDAN, Cisco Disability Awareness Network. I think it's really around awareness. And there's people in these ERG groups that might not even really, I mean, there's men in the women's group, right? And so a lot of it's around building that awareness and understanding the challenges and appreciating the perceptions or the philosophy of what those groups are trying to do. So I think that the biggest piece is the awareness and getting other people to understand that perspective from that respective group or demographic is a
Great.
big piece of it.
Dennis, what do we need to do? Let's,
To this young man's point, culturally incompetent or ill-trained staff will kill a program immediately. Work-based learning, we have found that that's the way to prepare individuals for work in semi-skilled and entry-level positions. I would like to see a reinvigoration, maybe rebranding of apprenticeship to go along with the theme of the conference, and incorporate apprenticeship in high schools and also in juvenile justice facilities as well as adult facilities.
great. Ann, I know I've got your research and development piece you talked about earlier. Go ahead.
Well, there is no system responsible for this population, no positive system. And the system that we created was with the business community, listening to them and responding very quickly to what they told us to do. I didn't have to be smart, I only had to be smart enough to listen. And when we followed their prescriptions and provided them with the workers that they asked us to, then they were our biggest supporters. And we did it through the Rotary organization because it's the largest and most influential one in our city. Then we practiced the art of enlightened self-interest. So essentially we gave them back. They were given an award in Singapore for the ISUS program that they funded. Do you see? So, and so every time they went to a Rotary meeting, they said, "How is your ISIS program?" And on our end, we got a chance to build a very strong, and they had the influence. They had the influence with the politicians. They had the influence with the city and county government. So that was the best I could determine.
Sounds great. John, last word.
Last word. So anybody knows me that knows I'm a pretty straight shooting kind of guy, and it's pretty simple for me. Guy I got to know, Greg Taylor, used to talk about being an innovative, disruptive force, period. I was involved in a summer jobs program back in the early 80s called the Blue Chip Summer Jobs Program for Baltimore City. The same poor program still runs today, doing the same poor work. It's time to be innovative forces that go out and make real change and not wait around for somebody else to do it. And the reason I always get really passionate about this, if you can't tell, is because, like I said, when I walk into work every day, I'm staring at young men and women who aren't quite sure where they're sleeping that night, what meal they've eaten, the last meal they ate. There's not time to wait around for policy. There's not time to wait around for another program. It's time to be an innovative, disruptive force that challenges some of the traditional systems that have existed. We all have the ability to do it. I mean, look at Ann's program, come to Baltimore, DC, look at our program, but I guarantee you'll find a bunch of those same programs in your own backyard.
And with the last 35 seconds, trying to keep to Ron's and Bill's message this morning of being on time. You know, I used to be a commissioner of education in Vermont, and I always remembered how I thought getting to that position I could change the world. And the fact of the matter is, what I learned there, and then I further learned, and I've been listening to each of these panelists, and I learned that policy is the last thing to change. And what we need to recognize, and I think it's a group like this that could do it, is that the way policy changes is first you have to be a disruptor, or you have to change practice, do something. But the key after that is that you then collect good data, because the way policy changes is first practice changes, then you get good data, and that results in policy changes. Policy becomes the way people, we can't do that because the policy says X. The policy will never change unless there's first a practice that has good results. So when I listen to Joni and Denis and Ann and John talk about their programs have great results. We need to take these programs that have great results put those programs in front of legislators, say these get positive results. And that's how you start to drive policy change. So with that, I think there's a 10 or 20-minute break, and the next sessions will begin soon. Thank you all very much. Thanks to the panel. Thank you very, very much.